So scap dyskinesia, it gets basically the gold standard. That's how I feel like everyone looks at a shoulder. And I've seen sometimes where I look over and people say, "Oh, that looks pretty good," and I'll see other times they go, "It looks bad," and then I don't like it. I thought it looked good for the bad person, or it looked bad for the good person sometimes. And so, do you use just a scapular dyskinesia test, and does that guide you a ton, or do you look at it more from like a global aspect? Like we just talked about, like maybe a shoulders down and a trunk tilt or something. Like, do you correct that first, or I guess what are your thoughts on the scap dyskinesia testing, and do you use it?
I've played around with them a little bit, measure distance of borders from the spine, things like that. What's the resting position? What is it in certain ranges? And I think it's something you can always pay attention to. I don't think you're wrong if you're doing that. But again, I think it goes back to, can they put their scap in these different positions? How much cueing or how much input from me does it take to get them into these positions? And again, I don't know if that makes them have a healthier shoulder. I think it's important for them to be able to reach those scap positions, but there's a large majority of our population that has scap dyskinesia, and I don't know that it's ever going to be resolved, and I don't know if it has to be. I think it's probably a side effect of being an overhead athlete, so, or even an athlete in general. So it's not something I throw out the window, but I value more appreciating different ranges of the scap and manipulating that, or having them manipulate it so that they can get into those positions, as opposed to get in this position and stay. I want it to look like the anatomical man, which
Yeah.
of course isn't going to be realistic.
I had a doctor one time. I was in school, and it seemed no matter what I put on the paper, he would never agree with my prognosis. And so, like sometimes I was like, I would just mess with him. Like I would go back and forth. Scap dyskinesia is not a diagnosis. Like it's not an ICD-10. I don't believe it's the test essentially. Like you're seeing what they have. Like the guy comes in with shoulder impingement. I'm gonna call it shoulder impingement, or call it something like that, as opposed to, oh, it's got type 1 scap dyskinesia. So we would go back and forth. I would call it a shoulder issue. He would call it scap dyskinesia. Another guy, very much the same symptoms, I'd call it, scap dyskinesia. He would call it shoulder impingement, and I never got a win there. It was never. He never agreed with me.
Well, you could say the same thing about shin splints, right? Technically, that's not an ICD-10, but it's still an issue.
Yeah. What I mean, medial tibial stress syndrome is like just a strain, or a strain of tibialis posterior. Like, what would you call
Either that or periosteal reaction, or I don't even know if you could say it's a stress reaction. I mean, it's not, that would be a more severe case of it, but I
it?
guess the main idea I'm trying to drive home is, like, don't get caught up in nomenclature, and just because something isn't a diagnosis doesn't mean it's irrelevant. But you kind of have to think about it from different approaches.
Yeah. And so I definitely I don't not look at scap dyskinesia stuff. Like I think it's good to see. Like, okay, you can have this guy put his arms out, whatever, and you'll see that there's winging on both sides, or winging more on one side. Um, and I think I'm just at a point now where I'm not just going to go, oh, I need a hammer serratus, hammer serratus, hammer serratus. There's more to it. So it's almost like the scaps are a byproduct of like what position the rib cage is in. So if the thorax and rib cage can get into a better position, I feel like the scaps will just follow suit. They will clear up to an extent. Um, and so I don't, like I said, not look at it. I just think there's more precise things now, or like for me, there's more low hanging fruit. Like I'm not gonna just hammer serratus. This dude needs to needs to learn how to bend his thorax. It's very stiff upper body, something like that. And so I look at it that way more. And then sometimes it just goes and like movement comes through after doing that stuff. And maybe I didn't hammer, just serratus punches and bear hugs and serratus wall slides. So like I said, I just think there's more ways to look at it a little more precisely, kind of what's going on. And like I think it's just a byproduct, if that's fair.
Would you ever say if someone, let's say they have beautiful scap, non-dyskinesis, would you ever, in their picture, would you ever say that guy has overly dominant serratus anterior? It's like that thing's working so hard that it's sticking that scap to the ribs. You know what I mean? Like that would take a heck of a lot of activation or tonicity, I guess, from those muscle groups that you're trying to drive home to counteract how much you're going to get from lat and pec and all the bad guy muscles from their movement that they need. It's like how much do you really expect to get a change when they're using the big muscles that they should be using to throw um, to counteract what position that's going to put the scap in. It's like they're going to get an anterior tip scap.
Yeah, 100%. Like you can't have too strong of a low trap and serratus. You did dissection 2 years ago, and what did this serratus look like?
I mean, it's pretty thin and spreads out. I mean, the lat spreads out too, but it's a smaller muscle, and it's not going to be one of those things that gets hypertrophic like a lat will or a pec.
Yeah,
it's fine.
And so exactly like something like that, like a low trap. Who's like I haven't taken it, but just from like listening to podcasts and like looking at pictures, not very thick. Um, Same thing with like a posterior capsule. Stuff's not thick at all, and so I like that got a lot of blame for a little while of his shoulder's lacking. It's his posterior capsule. And so like I agree. Like I don't think you can ever like you would say like he's got really good serratus and really good low trap. Those things are money right now. He just has a better concave convex relationship, and that's due to thorax mechanics.
Could you compare it to when you're saying hit the tiny muscles, hit the cuff muscles, like doing 3-pound dumbbells with whatever your movements are? It's like you're not expecting those guys to get super big and strong. It's like just address them and recruit them in the right way and basically don't let them get neglected.
Let's do a 3x10 at I don't know 10 degrees per second, and then hopefully that carries over to 7,000 degrees per second on the mound.
Yeah, functional.
You got to train slow to train fast.
Everything has its place.
Yeah. That I just think evaluations like it's funny, like that's the most boring aspect of athletic training at the beginning of course, like learning we're going over special tests again, we're going over tests, but it's almost like I'm the point now where now I'm getting back in. I'm like, oh man, I really wish I knew how to like really test for trunk rotation or hip rotation or whatever, like that would whatever. I feel like I'm getting back into it more to help me guide exercise selection, which we didn't even jump into it, but that'll be a longer topic. It's getting near 8. I'm about to turn to a pumpkin.